Great. So I guess whilst people are coming on to this session, I just thought I'd start by thanking everyone for joining. I can't believe it's been a month since the last one. Um, for those who are listening on the podcast and for those who are listening to this recording, you may recall that in last month's AMA, we briefly mentioned the launch of the sales transformation community. So over the last month, we've actually had quite a few people register their interests, and we will be formally launching it later on this week. So please, if you're interested, keep an eye out for it. Eddie, I think you're going to share the link to register to be part of this community in the chat function. And for anyone who's listening on the podcast, it is going to be in the podcast description. And it's really exciting. I mean, what we want to do and what the purpose for the sales transformation community is all about is bringing like-minded sales professionals together and to discuss on any topics that pertain to your roles in sales and to be connected with other people who, as a community, we can help support us as we go through time. So I just wanted to announce that before we start challenging Phil with any questions. The other announcement that I need to make is to do with one of our alumni students. So Grant Van Albrecht, I'm very happy to say, has written a book titled Transforming Sales Management and is hosting a webinar for the book launch where Phil will also be a panelist. Grant will be introducing his new change model that was the result of his final project on the Masters, Scared So What, and how people can use this model to embrace unexpected change. And he'll be joined by Patrick Joyner, so the MD of the Institute of Sales Professionals, Teresa Moulton, Chief Editor of the Change Management Review, Will Bollender, who's the professor at Texas A&M University. And Eddie, I hope you've got the link to hand to share it in chat. So I think it will be a very insightful session, and we recommend anyone joining if they can. Super. Okay, so I can see we've got a few people who are attended. So Peter Grundy, hi Peter, and Greg, Tiffany, great to have you here. And I really do hope you put Phil through his paces. It is one of my most enjoyable times of the month where we get to challenge the big boss. So any questions, put in chat. If not, Phil does have the tendency to pick on people who have registered and will probably try and unmute you to get your input, just to give you a bit of a heads up. Great, let's jump straight in. And Phil, I warned you that I was going to throw you a slight curveball question. Don't worry, it's not going to be too hard. But I'm just interested to know, what books have you been reading around sales that you would recommend me read? Because I feel like I haven't read anything since doing my masters, and I want to get back into the habit. And so I wanted to start this session by asking you, what recommendations would you give me?
Well, I think the book that we featured in the last podcast, Sales Enablement 3.0, was really interesting. And I think what was is sort of quite interesting for me about the book was that it is a very good holistic overview of what sales enablement is all about, not just exploring the aspects of systems and processes, but also approaches to sales training and so on. So I really enjoyed that book. But another book that I picked up is one that I have read many years ago, and I think it might have been a conversation with you, Will, that prompted me to open its pages again. And it's a book called Devine, and it's got you will not find this book in any bestseller books on sales processes. And I don't think the author of the book or the authors of the book, and I can't remember who the authors were, would have thought of this book as something that pertains to sales. But what I love about Devine is it's a story about how an individual who's an art collector and dealer had used his skills of matching buyers and sellers together to create an almost monopoly of the art world during I'm just trying to think now of the dates, but during the early 1900s. And his process of dealing with both sides, both sellers, i.e., people who owned these stately homes and mansions with lots of priceless works of art, with buyers, and typically many of these are over in the States. And his technique of matching buyers and sellers, I think we can learn so much from. And I remember sorry, just to go on just a bit more. I remember one of the cases that was written about in the book Devine was about a particularly wealthy industrialist in America who wanted to be seen to be having the right art in his home. And he came into his showroom in New York, and Devine said to him, "Sir, I appreciate that you are an incredibly wealthy man, and are really, I don't doubt that for one moment, but I'm not sure you're ready yet to hang my art on your wall." And I just love the audacity of that. But there's a certain authenticity about it because he really only wanted to sell art to people who loved it. And the scale of what he did was on at another level. So Devine is a book that probably will be slightly unexpected to people listening to the show. Great story about a salesperson, and you can pick up lots of interesting sales techniques in that book. How about that?
Great. Yeah,
So it
no, I
was a
like it.
curveball. I mean, I know I've
Yeah.
read others, but I can't remember them to hand. But those are the two most recent ones.
Sorry to put you on the spot,
That's
but
okay.
I have to take my opportunities where I get them.
Yeah.
Um, Great. Okay, so we had one question submitted
Okay.
from Gary Pye from an
From
organization called
SKF.
SKF. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he wrote in and said, for employees on an annual bonus structure, what other ways are most successful to keep a sales team motivated throughout the year?
Yeah, it's a really it's a really interesting kind of question about whether an annual bonus, structure or financial incentives are levers to drive a particular type of behavior, or whether they're set up um, to deal with the intrinsic motivation that's required of a sales team to, be fully engaged with the companies with which they work. And I think the two, the two are quite often linked, i.e., bonus, commission, and motivation. But actually, I think they need to be decoupled, and that one should treat the two topics separately. And I'd be very interested to hear Greg's and Peter Grundy's perspectives on this as well, if we can. But I think that Gary's question about sort of long-term sustainable motivation, which is the question that he was asking, I know not just at the beginning, at the end of the year, but throughout the year. I think that degree of motivation you can get when people can identify with a sense of purpose of what the organization is about and what they're trying to achieve and the values for which that organization kind of represents and being aligned with those. So I think that you can have a scenario where people 150% buy into their company's values and mission and what they're on the planet to kind of achieve, accepting that they may not be paid as well as they could do elsewhere. And, so I think that it's the purpose kind of concept that really keeps them, as opposed to companies who rely on very attractive bonus systems working with companies who lack the sense of purpose. So for me, perhaps rather, sort of tunnel vision, perhaps. I'd be interested, though, to get others' perspectives on it. Yeah, the bonus system addresses behavior, but purpose drives long-term sustainable motivation.
Yeah.
But I'd be very interested to
yeah.
hear others' points of view. I don't know if we could ask Peter, because Peter, I know that you spend a lot of time coaching very senior executives in companies, and I'm sure this is maybe a topic that crops up in some of your coaching conversations. So I don't know, Peter, if you're online, whether you would be prepared to kind of share your views on it.
Yeah, and there's my name to be sure it's me.
Yeah, hi Peter. So nice to hear from you and on the show.
No, thank you. Thanks for inviting me, and it's lovely to be here. I tend to agree with what you were saying there, Phil, and I've long been interested in your views about the power of values and the power of purpose. I think bonus without purpose leads to some sales leaders in North America that I've been coaching talked about some of their people being coin operated.
Oh, yes.
Nothing happens until you put some money in front of them.
Yeah.
And I think where we're coaching people to be more than salespeople, to be trusted advisors, then if it's all just about doing drive-by shootings because new business pays more commission than established relationships, then something's gone very wrong, I think. Whereas most organizations' profitability is often built on repeat business, long-term relationships, and a forecastable cash flow, rather than one-hit wonders, which tend to come and go.
Yeah, it's interesting because you've also sort of brought in some sort of other dimensions around sort of predictable forecasts and long-term client relationships, which can be significantly influenced by the way bonus systems are actually structured. So yeah, I completely agree that. I mean that in itself is another topic. To what extent do bonus systems kind of drive predictable performance and so on, and the right behaviors? But that wasn't the original question. But I think it's still such a big topic. Yeah. So
I think also, just to come back to the original topic, because I started to ramble on to one of my favorite subjects. But anyway,
feel free.
I've seen bonuses that work well to drive particular behavior, but I think they need to be ring-fenced, very specific, and not the main reason why somebody wants to work for my company.
Yeah. Okay. I wonder if Greg has a point of view on it as well. Greg, if I could involve you from SAP.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, happy to. The first thing I thought about when I heard the question was it specifically for salespeople or was it just employees? I can't remember how the question was worded.
Yeah, it was for sales teams. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think there's a little risk in if you kind of prescribe a yearly bonus system to a sales team, you may be saying to them, or they may read it this way, especially if they're coin operated or very motivated by money, they may see it as, well, if they're only willing to pay me on a yearly basis for performance in this, territory. Perhaps they know what the customer base, they can predict what the customer base is going to buy on average every year. So it's not really worth, quarterly incentivizing my sales team, because we know what they buy roughly every year. So we just need that managed by a salesperson, or perhaps, it's a farmer's kind of a territory rather than a net new name territory.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing that struck me about it. And then the second thing is, I think we're trying to mix both annual bonus payouts and quarterly, some more lucrative commission models for hunter type salespeople, and less lucrative for more customer focused and value based, perhaps salespeople. We're doing that at SAP, I suppose. So it's a mixture of the two.
Yes. But I think SAP as a company is one that's got a very strong sort of moral and ethical compass as well, Greg. Would you not agree that? I mean, I've certainly noticed that from our interactions with SAP. It's got a
I would. Yeah, they're in it for the long game for sure, and they have many years with some of their customers, so they don't want to like I think Peter used the term drive by, and they don't want that hit and run mentality. Even though it does happen sometimes, and that probably depends on the salesperson and how they motivate themselves. But a commission structure that doubles down or trebles down if you reach certain targets or go over your targets will certainly motivate that behavior. Even if the company values perhaps don't sing that from the rooftops, they won't reject those sales either. They'll celebrate them. So it's again, it sits from both sides really. There is a very ethical backdrop to it, but there's also room for selfishness and taking the money when it's there. And, so.
I mean, I've always wondered whether whether it's possible to run a highly successful, high-performing sales organization without sales commission.
Yeah,
because it can drive very individualistic approaches. Customers are sometimes, in recognizing that salespeople are paid commission bonuses, are wary about what the salespeople are selling because it's financially self-motivated rather than necessarily motivated out of a genuine interest in what the client's trying to achieve. So what do you think about that, Greg?
It is. It's a constant question that the business planners and the people at the top of every organization ask themselves at the start of every year: are we doing it the right way? Are we motivating the team the right way? Look at our fallout of our churn of staff this year, perhaps, and how come we lost 15% of our sales team or more? So they're constantly trying to refine the system and protect their overall financial goals. So they want to grow revenue every year. And that may or may not kind of conflict with the behaviors and the commission structures that they want to change for different reasons. One thing pulls in the opposite direction to the other, and in a lot of cases. So they're always trying to find that balance. But no, I don't think it's possible to have everybody in a sales organization not on a commission structure. I don't think so. But there's definitely room to, you could increase the percentage of your sales force to a bonus payout, or have more customer success metrics measuring them. And then having that 10 or 15% that are finding new business, introducing new accounts to the company, having them rewarded at a higher grade. But at the moment, what's happening is we still have people farming older, large, and still very lucrative accounts, and they're reaping big rewards from that as well. Whereas the workload and the effort may not be as significant as the net new name salesperson has to
Mm.
go through to find a new account and to close it. So yeah, there's definitely room for improvement there and to restructure the whole
Yeah.
pay model.
Peter, I don't know if you want to add any more comments before we go back to Will, but
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say is being practical, being pragmatic about these things, that the salaries you offer have got to be market relevant.
yeah.
And I think many of us, certainly I have in the past, gone out to recruit people and found that my rather strange ideas about compensation meant that nobody applied. So there is always the acid test about your reward process that says if nobody showed up for interview, then hello, you are not market relevant. You're not attracting the right attention, let alone attracting the right applicants.
Yeah.
That's really
Okay.
interesting. It kind of segues into the next question around transformation. And I mean, Phil, do you think, well, there's two parts to this question. What is the difference between change and transformation? But I just wanted to add, based on this conversation, is can commission and bonus structures drive transformation for organizations?
Okay. Well, I think Greg is going to be very familiar with probably what my answer is to the first question about the difference between change and transformation, because we cover this topic in so much detail on the master's programs that we run. And we often refer to the analogy of the caterpillar and the butterfly, and change is not building a faster caterpillar. Change is a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly, and it's something that's sustainable, and it's something that cannot be changed back. So really, you're talking about a sort of fundamental change of typically values and belief systems. And I think a lot of people talk about transformation, and I think it's possibly an overused word. I think a lot of people talk about transformation in the context of faster change or quicker change. And that indeed might be the right word, to be used, but they use the word transformative. We as as an organization only use this word in the context of a very deep-rooted change of values and belief systems. And in the context of strategy, let's say, it's actually sort of taking a market opportunity that an organization has, or a need to do a fundamental shift, and recognizing that the only way that organization is going to shift is if there is a fundamental change of mindset required. It's not a better CRM process. It's not different kind of sales structures, but it's a different way of thinking about how the business needs to be run and what's going to drive the business forward. And it's not every organization that needs to make that kind of change. So even though they may use the term transformative in the sense of high growth strategies, let's say, it's not necessarily transformation. I mean, we had a very interesting conversation this morning with the head of sales of an organization. He has about 2,000 salespeople inside his organization in EMEA. And he was talking about, and he shared with me his transformation initiatives, and they've called it sales transformation. And when I looked at the initiatives, there were things like CRM, sales ordering processes, pricing strategy. There were six different initiatives that were being sort of the pillars under which he was going to achieve this transformation. And my concern when I saw this was is it really transformation, or is it simply becoming more efficient at what you're currently doing by improving your use of technology and different processes? And it was only till we got into the conversation with him that he said, no, it's not just about these initiatives, but it's actually what we need is a fundamental change in the way people see and think, the way they want to do business. Part of it's connected with digital and digital transformation, which is a key part of their change process. But a lot of it's to do with the way in which they engage with customers in conversation and use those conversations to develop new business opportunities. Because he was saying that his 30% sales target simply can't be reached doing things as we currently done it. And none of these initiatives that we looked at earlier was addressing that fundamental mindset change. So, so I think that, the butterfly caterpillar analogy is a really good analogy for me. If you are looking at simply selling more and doing it faster, then you may be talking about being a faster caterpillar. But if you are looking at some more profound shift required, then that could be transformation. And sorry, your second question will link to that. Could you just repeat that?
Yeah, it was, I think I now know the answer, but can commission structures and bonus lead to transformation?
I really think they can support transformation. I don't know if they should lead it. I don't think the simple, in this example that I've given you, if the organization that he was leading simply relied on a new bonus structure to get them from where they are to where they need to be, they simply wouldn't get there, because they need to do something more profound than just looking at the change on a behavioral level. They need to kind of dig deeper. I was quite interested. Again, we meet some fascinating people on the podcasts that we run, and the last, I think, one of the podcasts we did was around the strategic narrative, and I really enjoyed the conversation with Andy Raskin. He was talking about changing the art of conversation at the point of sale, and he was really making the point that we've really got to articulate our point of difference through a different type of a strategic engagement. And he gave the example of Benioff and Salesforce, and he was using as an example that when Salesforce sort of entered the market, he didn't come in trying to compete one CRM system against another. He came in saying that, why would you on earth wouldn't you want to do a cloud-based solution rather than sort of an on-premise solution? Because this is the way the world is going, and you don't want to be left behind. And so the narrative that you have, the way in which you sell that particular story, is potentially a mindset shift, because you are not moving away from on-premise licensing features, advantages, benefits to a completely new way of doing business. And so for organizations having to make, that was an example of what I would describe as transformation, because it's going deeper than just leveraging, financial models to sell more. So I've probably gone on far too long on this particular question, but it's a topic that's so close to our heart, as you know, that I tend to sort of go off on one a bit. So Will, I'll stop.
So thanks. But Peter, Greg, if you've got any questions for Phil, please do speak now or put in chat, and
Yeah.
otherwise I'm going to
Well, I
continue
well, I know
firing
that
questions over at Phil.
I know that Greg is going to kind of know, I know that sort of some of the challenges that SAP have faced, I mean, when was it that cloud, moving to cloud was first introduced by the organization, Greg? It was quite some time ago, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we started doing cloud, and we used to call it on-demand products
Yeah.
as far back as 2010.
That's right.
You know,
That's
but
13 years ago. Yeah.
But the transformation aspect and that whole conversation around transforming to a cloud company is far more recent than that, because, and I just wanted to make one quick point on that, if I may. If transformation comes with fear, there's a big fear factor. And if you take the previous point, we talked about the commission structure and transformation. That's where the fear of losing your best salespeople who may or may not be motivated by customer success, losing them, and perhaps the business that they bring in every year as a result of you moving too closely to what your transformation might look like, because I don't think they know what the end product in the transformation is yet. It might be more customer success driven, less salesy, people managing accounts, but they're afraid of that at the moment, and it's not something we have a big legacy, and that's part of our problem as well. We're around almost over 50 years now, so we've a lot to protect, a lot of account bases and repeat business to protect or to renew every year, and I don't mean that in the cloud sense. I mean that in just customers who spend money every year, and we're trying to convince them all to move to the cloud as well, which is a big ask for some of them. There's a huge amount of fear associated with transformation, even though our signaling and our message to the markets is very pro, transformation, move to the cloud, move to the customer success model. Value is all about the customer value as opposed to, our earnings and our growth every year. But on the other hand, it's still business as usual. That's the conflict and the fear, I think, that's associated with it all. It's our markets and our investors and everybody else wants to see growth, and whether it works, whether they get that growth from the newer models, or mostly from the older models, remains to be seen. Still, we don't have the answer to that yet. I think people would argue on both sides of that.
Yeah. And certainly to the outside world, it would appear that SAP is doing sort of major strides towards this ambition set out 13 years ago. I know it's not been it's not been a quick process.
No.
And I do recall this amazing quote from Forrester some years ago where the CEO was saying that the biggest frustration he has with sales directors, people running the sales functions, was it takes 18 months, for strategy ideas to be kind of implemented. It's such a long time frame. So the board of people can set out this noble vision to sort of transform the business, and what was coming out was the time it takes to move from the board decision to execution in the field is 18 months. For SAP it might have taken longer, but it just takes time, some of these things.
Yeah, and the people are essential to it as well. That's the other thing. When you talked about the different metrics, the different models they were looking at changing, it was really boiled down to whether the people will adopt it and whether the people will get behind that. Those changes, that's crucial, obviously. And it's interesting within SAP, the line of the business, as we call it, HXM, it's human experience management. So it's the HR software, success factors, etc. They have been outperforming some of their other lines of business for the last number of years, and as recently as the last quarter, And I think it's because they speak that language of the people, or they're asking organizations to reorg themselves by putting their people at the center of it. And COVID and all of those things help to drive that, I think. But it's interesting to see that they're outperforming because they have that people-centric approach.
So here's another thought, was that if you take the context of the transformation question that was posed earlier, and you put that in the context of the economic reality of what organizations are needing to face. I mean, I had had a conversation early on today with someone else about the economic reality of the world. So I come back to the connecting with transformation. And this lady was saying that, and she sits on the Chamber of Commerce in her country and Germany, that a joint Chamber of Commerce that she was on the board of. And they were talking about, the challenges and the prevailing winds that organizations have right now with, demand, economic. Sorry, Peter, I'll come back to your hand. I've just noticed Eddie's told me your hand is up, so I'll come back to you in just a moment. And she was saying that she felt that it's becoming more difficult for selling organizations to really be relevant. And she was saying that they've had a couple of regular customers who they have a really good relationship with, expecting that deals would be closed in Q1 of this year, and they simply have not. And then she's gone back to these customers and said, how come? We know you really well. How come you've delayed it? And the customers were saying to her, well, actually, your selling organization simply has not articulated the business relevance in the context of the world in which we are now working, which is changing by the quarter almost, and that your solutions simply aren't relevant right now. And that sort of hurt her, we're having the discussion about whether the market dominance that some of these organizations have in their market sometimes lead them to being slightly complacent, and that by being complacent, they're not asking the right questions, they're not keeping close enough to customers. So I suppose I'm coming back to this topic of transformation. It's made me question whether in markets which are tough, and we're talking about economic crisis. Listening to Credit Suisse at the moment, who've had X billion pounds taken out of their accounts in the last month. I think it was in Christmas. It was extraordinary, over 100 billion. When you've got financial markets that are being stress tested and supply markets being tested by sort of energy, do companies default back to their original levers for driving growth? And is that something which is fit for purpose moving into the future? And so we had quite an interesting conversation about the economic reality of today, forcing, in this case, this particular person to question assumptions she had been making about the efficacy of her own sales organization, and that she was beginning to question, how do we get this shift in mindset from the selling organization? How do we change perceptions? And I'm sure the answer is not going to be we give them a better bonus. Yeah, it's going to be something else. Anyway, sorry, Peter, I rambled on again, and I think you put your hand up.
No, I was just boringly going to agree with everything that you and Greg said, actually, but a couple of things that crossed my mind.
Yeah.
One is that I don't believe that commission and bonus systems can drive transformation. I think they can help it. I think they nudge people in the right direction. But like you, I like your analogy of the caterpillar and the butterfly. And it also made me think of Henry Ford's expression that if I'd listened to my customers, I'd have invented a faster horse.
That's a
Whereas
great one. Yeah.
the car was the transformation. And similarly,
Yes.
I see it with in my team who are coaching sales leaders in different parts of the world. I think we've actually begun to learn that for some of them, they want to talk about change. And that seems to mean, in some cases, being a better sales director. Whereas
Yeah.
transformation, which the organization definitely needs, is about saying, well, my future is in leadership now.
Yeah.
And rather than being best salesperson or best sales director in the company, transformation is about taking a wholly different view about where I'm going. And finally, just to say how much I agree with Greg about the subject of fear, we did a big exercise in a bank or far away from here, where the perception was that cross-selling and upselling would transform their treasury sales operation.
Yeah.
And our research turned out that one of the biggest things getting in the way of people actually executing on cross-selling was fear. That if I bring Greg in to see my customer who's Phil, Phil might like Greg better. Greg might have better ideas. I might lose out financially. I might lose out in terms of kudos. And so the danger of having what we call a level 5 or level 6 confirmation with the customer was dramatically reduced, because I was actually spending more time watching what Greg was doing and trying to make sure I didn't get left behind. So I think we underestimate the value of quite primitive things like fear. End of sermon.
Yeah, fully agree with that. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, and the equivalent in SAP, just for your information, is the industry account executive who looks after every company in that industry, and then the line of business executive, which only sells one part of the product portfolio. So the industry guy can sell everything, and the LOB guy can only sell one product, like success factors, let's say. And they always try and collaborate with the industry AE, because he or she is in charge of the account, and they want to get their product on the bill of materials. So that all that collaboration and fear is exactly correct in that sense as well. They fear the other LOB who wants to get their product onto the bill of materials as well. And it's all about how they manage their relationship with the industry AE. And then, as you can see, we're having a conversation about internal alignment rather than the customer themselves, So,
Correct.
Yeah. And also in another organization, unless the highest ranking person, who was the client business manager, was almost a sort of international statesman level, unless he was interested in your particular angle of what you might be selling to his client, he might never actually get anywhere near them.
Exactly. Yeah. Same. Yeah, absolutely the same.
Yeah, and I think customers can, they get this sort of conflicting messages from, depending on who's selling to them, and they I'm sure they also sort of play a role in sort of maybe creating
Playing them off against each other.
playing the model against each other as well, which is interesting. It's making me come back to the one of the earlier things we talked about is, do bonus schemes work? It's at the end of the day, I suppose the question, and this came back to my kind of original research that I did around how do customers want to be sold to, and that if you develop a selling system that's entirely based on how customers want to be sold to, will you be more successful than if you didn't? And I strongly believe that's the case, that if you are able to develop whatever system and have very clever people designing, sort of bonus schemes and incentive schemes that somehow sort of get it right, so that the customer is always at the heart of the, the customer is always at the heart of the thinking, if you like. Maybe that's the role of these business execs, the person who orchestrates, who do I want to put in front of my customer? that he is the person, or she is the person that is the custodian of customer centricity in that sense. Yeah, maybe that's it. Interesting. I love this conversation. It's really good. Yeah, thank you, Peter and Greg, for chipping in as you have done.
It is
Yeah.
really good. And Phil, I've got other questions here, but I don't want to go too much off topic because I just find this whole topic
Yeah.
of conversation in this AMA fascinating. So hopefully it's not too left field considering what we've been talking about, but this question is around looking for the right mindsets when you're hiring someone. And as we know, I think mindset is so important. But what sort of questions should I be asking to see if this person in a sales role has the right values needed to sell in the way that my customers want? So I guess it's about recruiting the right person for the team.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, values are one thing, and expertise and competence is another. But I think that if if you look at there's certain values, for example, that we hold very dear to how we do things at Consalia, which are around being authentic, being client centric, being proactively creative, and then tactfully audacious. So these are the four underpinning values that we look for, for salespeople who may be kind of joining our team. And so if you park those just for a moment and you imagine yourself that you're having an interview with someone about a potential role in an organization like ours, the question is, what questions would you ask to determine to what extent does this person sitting at the interview sort of have these embedded in the way they think and work? And you could ask a general question like, what are your values? Yeah. You could ask that that question. And I find that, that gives you limited information. But for a start, I find that when you do ask people what their personal values are, they often haven't thought about them in that much detail. It's a question that we don't seriously reflect on unless you come on the master's program or whatever, where we do spend an awful lot of time looking at values and belief systems. So what I would so that's definitely a question I would ask, but not expecting that you would necessarily get any information that would help you in an interview. There may be some individuals who have really thought it through and are able to explain how they've got to where they thought it, where they thought it through, and that is quite impressive. But I would say was rarer. So what we tend to do is we ask people to talk about examples of things that they've done that have worked really well. And we would get them to talk about like pivotal moments in their sales, career, either pivotal positive or pivotal negative. And we would ask them to describe what happened, and we would explore not just what happened, but how they felt after what happened. And then we would ask them questions that would link back to what extent do you think your what you've just described tell you about the values that you have. Yeah. So we would sort of move away, if you like, from what do you think are your core values and why you have them, but with these examples and illustrations, see if we could then deduce from those the values that we deem to be important, at Consalia. Having said that, the question that often gets asked is it possible for people to be trained in the values? Is it possible for people to adopt the values? And I do believe it is. Yeah, if they've got a growth mindset, if they can demonstrate that, I do believe it is possible that that you can help people embed those values in the way they sell. And we've got countless examples of where that's kind of happened. So if they don't necessarily come up with the right words, if you like, or the words that are closely linked with the values that we think are critical, for the way in which we do business, then it doesn't necessarily matter. It's growth mindset coupled with examples of sales opportunities and really drilling down into some of the detail of what worked and didn't work and getting them to reflect on it in an honest and authentic way. That's what we do to try and get close to the values. And we also, of course, have our own self-assessment tools. We have the mindset survey tool that we get people to do. That's what we do. But I'm not saying it's the right way. And it could be that that Peter, Greg have got other ideas to add. I don't know if we've necessarily cracked it, because I think the art of interviewing is one of the most difficult things to do, actually, in managers. People are very good at hiding things or presenting X when they really mean Y.
Great. And I'm just wondering if Greg, Peter, do you have any comments there or any other questions you might want to ask Phil?
I can give you a quick comment on it then. And I think Peter mentioned it earlier on as well. How you design the sales criteria in the job advertisements can really sway whether somebody shows up or not. So
Yeah,
I think a lot of the job specs for sales roles are written based on mimicking others and based on what they think worked in the past, etc. But what I was going to suggest was, if the customer feedback has been collected, as in, you mentioned it earlier in the call, we didn't really, with your Chamber of Commerce example, we didn't really feel that your sales team were positioning the value in the right way, so we're not ready. So that type of feedback, if we have a collection of that feedback from a various different customers that the company already has, and they share that feedback, in its raw form with perhaps an interviewee for a sales role, and just ask them what they think of that. What are their thoughts on it, without trying to sway them in a certain direction or not. Just ask them what they think of it, and where they feel, where they, because those values will kind of appear if they're given options, like you would in a maybe in a psychometric test or so. Given the options, you usually know which one you're going to go with. And then you kind of get an idea of where they are, and they could be very revealing. They may or may not. But plus the interviewee may want to give a certain impression to get the job, and they may want to tell the interviewer what they want to hear, because they need the job, and they want to earn quickly. So it's a game in that sense as well. You're trying to identify an honest approach.
But you run quite sophisticated assessment center approaches, don't you, Greg? To recruit. I think Will went through one of those. Is that right, Will?
Yeah, but quite a long time ago.
Long time ago, earlier in your sales career, you sort of
my first interview as a DNA.
Oh, very good.
At the time at SAP.
He failed it, unfortunately. I'm only joking. That's a curveball I'm putting back at you, Will.
That's a good thing. If you fail that one, that's a good thing.
Right. I did not fail, but at the time I didn't realize the job was based in Dublin.
Oh yeah, that's where I used to work. Yeah, in the inside sales office. Yeah. Wow.
But actually, it is amazing to see, with some of the recruitment processes, the degree that organizations go through to check, that at a competence level, mindset level, a values level, that people are have the right qualities needed, if you like, for a particular job role. So Yes, I've probably given a rather simplistic kind of response for Consalia's response, but I know that, organizations have very scientific ways of doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just found that there was always a conflict between, is the organization customer driven or are they revenue driven? Are they sales driven? As a former salesperson, I always found that you were expected to be a sales driven person, not a customer driven person.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I know that's changing and the language is changing around it now, but I don't know if it has actually changed that much
Yeah.
for the traditional sales role.
That in itself is a big topic.
Yeah.
That's-
Guys, I'm conscious of time. So I'll wrap up. But Phil, I don't know if you're even aware of this, but it's your work anniversary today, I
Oh,
believe.
gotcha. So people have been sort of commenting on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
How many years have I been at Consalia? Is that it? I feel as
Yeah.
though this is a lifetime rather than a Consalia time. Oh, yeah.
Yes. 17 years.
17 years. Go on.
So what have been your biggest learnings?
My biggest learnings. Go on, Will. I don't know. I think life is a journey, and I think that I would have not imagined that Consalia is where it is today, 17 years ago, because we've now got a very different purpose, a very different vision to that we had in the 17 years. I would have actually had no idea that we would have embarked so strongly on the sales education initiative pathway that we've been on. And I think that, I feel as though it's been a brilliant journey, actually. I think that it's been this mission of ours to help try and make sales the world's most sought after profession. We're still playing in a very big ocean here, but we are making some definite inroads, and there's no question. And so from that point of view, I'd say the last 17 years has been an amazing journey. But I have a feeling that it's only about now to start, we've grown and developed, but I think the opportunities are going to accelerate moving forward. So I have have every in the next 17 years, if I'm projecting ahead, I can tell you two things. One is I won't be here, and the other is that Consalia will be in a very different place in 17 years, which I think is going to be very exciting.
Right. Well, thank you.
Thank you for the
And
question.
thanks, Peter and Gregor, and everyone for your contributions. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
And
Thank
lovely
you.
to have you both. And Peter, so nice to hear from you as well. Greg, we've spoken to more recently, but Peter, it's been a while. So pleased you're in contact with us. Yeah.